Hell, you could say that 10,000 times and it still wouldn't be enough.
It fires me up, man.
I love it. Say it one more time.
Shake and bake!
Does that feel good?
Yeah, it rhymes. They're both verbs.
It's awesome.
Hey, you're listening to 200 Proof Gospel, the podcast. Check us out on Spreaker, Podbean, iTunes, Pirate Christian Radio, Friday mornings, 9:30 p.m., or a.m. rather, not p.m. Tune in 9:30 p.m. I don't know what you'll hear. 200 Proof Gospel at gmail.com, 200proofgospel.com, the website. Find us on the Twitter and the Facebook and all that good stuff. And that was John Bartley and 5-0. Diamond Head is our unofficial new music that I've been using here for a while. With me on the Skype, it's just Mark and me. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am groovy, man. Groovy.
Ooh,
I am working on
music.
I'm working on the tiki bar in the basement. It's quite excellent. It's coming along nicely. I'm putting down flooring right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a clearance place here in the Cleveland area called Ollie's, and they have all sorts of stuff, but it's mostly, as I understand, clearance stuff. And they had that vinyl that looks like hardwood flooring, and it's in slats and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm putting that down right now, and it's cool stuff. It works great, and it's waterproof, and basement floods. I don't have to worry about the carpet catching all the moisture and stuff. So it's pretty neat stuff. And
yeah, we got that. We just put that in the parish house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the whole first floor.
Yeah, it's kind of bulletproof too. It's
yeah, it looks gorgeous. You never guess it was that kind of stuff.
No, it does. It looks like the real thing. It's really hard to tell.
It's really come a long way.
If you get down on your hands and knees and feel it, you can say there's something about this that doesn't feel like wood. But how many people are going to do that, really?
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm excited about that, and God willing, before summer, I will be able to inaugurate the D'Onofrio's Royal Ohana Room, which will be pretty cool. That's actually Hawaiian for the Royal Family Room. So there you go, the Ohana Room. Everything going well with you at church?
Yeah, things are going great. We're doing really well. We're actually entertaining the fact that our school, we might be running out of room.
Wow!
At the end of this year,
serious
the next school year. Yep.
Holy cow! And here, when I left, it was gasping and wheezing. Apparently, I was the problem.
No, I tell you, it is so obvious that the economy turned around.
Yeah,
and we also started a 2-year program, and so that got filled up. So, for example, for the next fall, well, actually starting this summer, that's already filled.
Well, cool. Tell Marty and the gang there that we miss them and love them, and someday we'll be back to visit. We'll see.
Oh, absolutely.
If they'll let me back into Missouri, I don't know the way that I left, if they'll ever let me in again. But
sure. Missouri's bigger than Kirkwood.
It's just talking about the whole state. I wasn't even talking about Kirkwood. Anyway, raise your mug, your iPhone, your Android device. Here we go. It's time for the toast. And I better push the button.
To that washing that declares us blameless and pure, that will cause us to stand without shame on that day. Amen.
Amen.
I actually had 2 glasses that time.
Yeah, I heard do that again.
Yeah, it was great. Don't tell anybody I'm drinking 2 glasses at a time.
I have, Troy did the last program, and I still have his cup in here, so I don't know. That's my metal cup and his plastic cup that was left behind. Well, anyway, we were talking about the table of duties out of the catechism. We've talked about Duty. We talked about the government last time, citizens, and all that, and the time before that about the church and what pastors owe their hearers and what the hearers owe their pastors and all that. In the Burgundy Catechism, we are on page 38 now. And today it is what husbands owe to wives, what wives owe to husbands, what parents owe to children, what children owe to parents. I don't know if we'll get through all that or not, but I'm ambitious, Mark.
You go for it.
So
we'll blow through this.
Yeah, let's just jump right in. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. 1 Peter 3:7. Weaker partner, who are you male chauvinist pig, to say weaker partner?
Well, you asking me that?
Oh, I thought you wrote 1 Peter. I'm sorry.
No.
I was mistaken
I
there.
wrote the Gospel, Mark.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no, here, though, actually, this could fall back on me, I guess, because Craig is from Crag, which is of the rock, and Peter was a rock, so I guess we could blame me for this. I'm a male chauvinist pig.
You got to love loose hermeneutics.
Yeah. Well, I don't care. I can live with being a male chauvinist pig because the pig is the noblest of all creatures that I eat. They're delicious. How do we make sense of this to those in the 21st century context, Mark, who really, really can't get past the two words, the weaker partner there, that, that's all that I'm going to hear because of what culture has done to me?
Well, it's one of those things that the sexes have become a political movement in America. So once anything gets politicized, it ends up losing its meaning, and it all gets geared towards power and money. And I think when you talk about the historical meaning of these words, the weaker vessel, I think anybody who, if they could possibly be objective about it, they would say, if you're raising children and you watch what the wife does raising the children, men are usually in awe of how strong they are, how loving they are, how compassionate they are. But because they are so busy with the children, they are prone to attacks from the outside, from outside the family. And that's kind of how I explain it, because you realize that the way God has created them to bear children and everything that it takes in their bodies to be able to have a child in their womb, it changes them dramatically. And so you see from the outside world, from the culture itself, a sinful culture, you see how it completely drains mothers who are raising their children. And so I think there's, that would be, quote unquote, an example of where you see the world looks at them and say they are the weaker vessel. And at the same time, as I often point out, when I go visit the preschool, I last 5 to 10 minutes max, and I go crawling out of the room. and because it's just amazing, their energy, their constant questions, the constant thinking about things that are so beyond out of what I thought I was talking about.
I think
let alone just their insane, their insane energy. So I think, biblically speaking, there is a side that we understand in its context what that means.
I think that, we want to read this in a 21st century context, and so we're going to be insulted because we don't understand the context that this is written in. But really, in all reality, to say that the women are the weaker sex is simply also another way of saying that it is within men in particular, that we want to protect women. And we recognize that women are vulnerable. And so we want to look out for them. We want to protect them. And we want to respect them. They are more subject to prey than men. And so we simply are saying that treat them with respect as the weaker partner, as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. So I always like to say in my wedding sermons, we are equal but different. And it's not that one is greater than the other. It is simply that we are different. And she is strong in ways that we are weak. You were just demonstrating that. If you locked me in a room with preschoolers for a day, I would probably end up in a loony bin. But with women, they're capable more of that than we are. And so, when we say the weaker sex, we aren't saying that they're inferior. We're simply understanding that there's a difference here. And men in our masculinity makes us physically stronger. It makes us emotionally stronger in certain ways. And in other ways, it makes us emotionally weaker. So that strength is simply that we are to treat women with respect, understanding that you don't get too many 6'3", 280-pound women who, can go and lift heavy weights and do mighty feats of strength. Now, there are a few, but they're rare. So there's just this idea of equal but different going on here. Does that make sense, Mark?
Well, it does, because the equal but different acknowledges the reality of the creation and how it's been created. I mean, because that would be, if there were equality, doesn't mean the same when we deal with the laws, because the laws of the land will emphasize equality, but it doesn't mean the same, because that's socialism.
Yeah. So, before God, we are equally redeemed. Christ died equally for both sexes, and we all have souls that are of equal value before God. But, there are physical realities and there are emotional realities. And I think that for someone to receive this as an insult, they have to really be looking for the insult. Because it's just simply saying, husbands, respect your wives. Understand, they're a little more fragile than you are, physically, if not emotionally. And we move on. So
well,
anyway.
I think the weaker vessel comes after the first sentence, though. Live with your wives in an understanding way.
Yes.
Showing honor to the woman. And I think why is it that guys have to be told to be understanding of their wives?
Well, because they're different. That's why.
Exactly. Exactly. It's
right? It goes back to the different.
Right. Exactly.
We don't operate the same way. Some men and women do, but that's not normal. That's not usually the case. Yeah. Anyway, I just think that I'm probably going to dig myself into a hole that I'm not going to be able to find out. So anyway, let's go back here. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Let's just stop there for a second and let that sink in. Treat them with respect. Let's stop there and let that set in. As a weaker partner, heirs with you of a gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Okay? Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Colossians 3:19. It is easy to be harsh with your wife. It's also easy for wives to be harsh to their husbands. It goes both ways, right?
It does.
Yeah. And we tend to get harsh with those that we're most familiar with and those that we spend all day with. And we start to lose that compassion because those little things that we thought were so charming 20 years ago are now like fingernails on a chalkboard. But it goes both ways. It's not just men. It's women also.
Right.
So love your wives and don't be harsh with them. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Oh no, Ephesians 5. This is the one that gives a lot of gas as we prepare for weddings, because this is one of the appointed readings along the way. And I think that we really, really need to look at the greater context of this passage. So, I don't have my Bible open here. Mark, do you have a Bible handy?
Yep. Husbands, love your wives, beginning at verse 19. Well, first of all, I'll start at 18. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. So the overall context is our submission to the Lord. And I think even before that, we are being told to put on Christ, put on then as God's chosen one, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you. So that's the context. As he then moves into telling us that let Christ be the ruler of your hearts, let the word dwell in you richly. And then he turns and he begins to go through the family. And the family starts with the wives, which I think is always interesting. He doesn't start with the husbands. He starts with the wives. Wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents.
Let's read this passage from 5:22 to the end of the chapter here. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that'd be baptism, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, except for me when I look in the mirror, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. Emphasis. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So I think, Mark, when we look at this, we have to back way up, and we have to ask, how do you see Christ? Is Christ a tyrant? Is Christ a jerk? Does he lord and dominate, or is he a suffering servant?
Correct. And I think when you grasp the truth that is very clear, it is Christ who suffered and died. It is Christ who is the suffering servant, who watches out for his bride, the church, in every matter, not only unto death, but into eternity. And I think the Colossians passage, then, this is where it's the same structure. You have Jesus, wives, husbands, children, fathers, house servants. He goes right down the life of the family and how it exists from day to day. But for the Christians, it all starts with the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So you have to take the whole package, because if you don't, then so children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Okay, kid, I want you to go out and steal me a car. Well, I got to obey them.
Right. Doesn't quite work that way.
Fathers, don't provoke your children lest they become discouraged.
Right.
Do you realize how provoked they are every time you discipline them as they grow up, especially through high school? Oh, have I provoked some wrath?
You know, there's a lot to be said with the good old days when if your child disrespected you, you could legally drag him out to the edge of town and throw rocks at him.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, says the guy without any kids. So anyway.
All the more so. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I think with the Ephesians text also, though, that we have to kind of, if you're going to look at this emotionally, you have to kind of step back and you almost need to start with verse 25 and then work backward to 22 in our context. Love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that she might sanctify her, having cleansed her, and so forth. And so the man is called to die for his wife, and not just die, physically protecting her, but die to himself also. It's much easier to love someone when you know that they are willing to sacrifice so much for you. And it's much easier to respect someone when you know that they're willing to sacrifice so much for you. And that goes both ways, husbands and wives. When you know that she is willing to sacrifice for you and he is willing to sacrifice for her, it is much easier to love someone like that and to love them to death, to your own death. And so when you step back and you realize, A, at the end of the text, this is about Christ and his church, and B, that under that kind of third use of the law that teaches us to reflect, in our lives what a perfect and righteous God looks like. When we see his love for us and we are called to that kind of love for one another, it's a lot easier to submit ourselves to one another, to be patient, to be kind, and even to say, okay, you know what? I am going to allow you to go ahead and be in charge of this. And that's missing so much in our world.
Well, and I think it's the form of feminism that has ruined everything for the word submit.
Yeah.
Because the idea of submitting is the product of loving someone. The children have to submit. We have to submit when the police officer pulls us over.
Right.
I mean, there's a very good and loving part of submitting. And because it partially is it's predominantly, I should say, what maintains order in all of life. And so that's why I think when you take that, when it gets ripped out of context, then radical feminism wants to, line you up, put a target on you.
Okay. So
but when you
no, go ahead. Sorry.
But when you keep it in life, well, everybody's submitting to someone.
Right. So if the cop pulls you over and he gets on his speaker and he says, "Sir, I'm going to approach your car. Please keep your hands on the dashboard. Your car was described in a murder in the neighborhood, and same car, same color. So keep your hands on the dashboard where we can see them." And then they come up and they've got their hand on their gun and they're ready to shoot you and everything else. You have not lost your rights as a citizen. You have not lost your place in this world. You are submitting to their authority, and you realize, gosh, I hope they catch the guy, but it ain't me. And I hope I don't get arrested, them thinking that it was me. But when we are told to do certain things by those who are in authority over us, it doesn't diminish us, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. Well, look at
it's
any
simply a
employment
participation.
arrangement.
Yeah.
Any employment arrangement.
Right.
You're looking at the reality that you submit to your employer.
Yes.
And many times when people, they make a conscious decision not to submit, and therefore they end up in trouble. Do you know what I mean? When you tell them to get that wall painted and he doesn't paint the wall, then what? You're in trouble.
Yeah, but if you
You don't
do a
think-
good job on the wall, maybe you'll get a raise and you'll be put in charge of wall painting.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
You know, it's not just punishment, but there's also reward in this.
Now,
Now,
actually get your check this week.
well, that too. Yeah, I remember my dad always saying, you know, don't go looking for praise with a boss. Your paycheck is the praise. So just take
Very
it
well stated.
and be happy. So anyway, I guess what we're really talking about here is love and the kind of love that Christ shows for his church and how it is easy for us to love him because he first loved us so much that he laid down his life for us. And when we see someone who is like this, when we rebel against him and we see what we're doing, those who are truly growing in the faith come to hate that about themselves and hate that sin within themselves more and more.
Right.
And
And
so-
for the believer, what happens is you realize love. It goes back to Bach's dictum: love is law, faith is gospel.
Hmm.
So when you acknowledge that you love someone, you are now submitting to the law to love. Do you know what I'm saying by
Yes.
by that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because and so now you take the steps to show that love, and it's all law. And so it just follows from that when you move into the structure of husband and wife and children. The love then is these are our boundaries for wives, for husbands, for children, fathers, mothers, whatever.
1 Peter 3, they were submissive to their own husbands like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. I don't think that we're really in our 21st century world expecting women to call their husbands master, but we are saying,
Maybe not in your home. Wait.
I know your wife.
Wait. Donna might be listening.
Yeah, right. Better backpedal out of that one quick. But Abraham loved Sarah so much that he tried to give her away 2 or 3 times because he's a big chicken,
He's wimping out.
right? I don't know. If I was Sarah, I think there would have to be a lot more to the relationship than just that, and I'm sure there was, much more. We know that Abraham loved Sarah, but we also know that he was kind of a coward.
Right.
What do you make of that text, Mark?
Are you talking about the First Peter
3,
text?
yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because what he's describing is the holy women. The holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves by submitting to their own husbands. So when you take, it's always hilarious because when my daughter gets ready for school and my son gets ready for school, the difference is my daughter's up an hour and a half before. She's in there putzing around for 45 minutes to an hour. My son gets ready for school. All of a sudden I hear this terror running up the stairs, quick comb, make sure he looks halfway decent, and out the door he goes. and it's tied to how he says the adorning, the holy women who adorn themselves in light of God and the faith that he's granted to them. And one of the ways that they adorned them was their submission to their husbands by showing love to their husbands. And then that's where it goes into Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and all that kind of stuff. Because it follows up again immediately. Because it's interesting whether it was the Colossians passion passage or this First Peter passage, you have this order unfolding that the instructions start with the wife, not the husband. And so here again, it starts with the whole discussion earlier. For you are straying like sheep, but now you've returned to the Lord, to the shepherd, the overseer of your souls. So, and it starts with wives talking about adorning them and making themselves beautiful, and how they make themselves beautiful out of the love for their husband, because they move away from the gold and the jewelry and what you're wearing to their glory being found in the love for their husband. And then the same structure, then he goes on, likewise, husbands, live with your wives and be understanding, showing honor to them. So when it unfolds in 1 Peter, you have that same structure, and then finally verse 8 comes along. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. And so it comes back to the humility in every believer's submission to Christ, from whom we get the humble heart, from whom we grasp what true brotherly love is.
And I think that, as we're pretty much out of time again.
Whoa, that was fast.
Yeah, it sure was. I think that all of this needs to be bound in grace, that we need to be gracious with each other. That, when you read the wives be submissive to your husbands, a lot of people jump immediately to that gives him license to be an abusive jerk. And nothing could be further from the truth. He is called to die for her. He is called to lay down his life for her, to sacrifice for her. And when you start to look at it through that lens, I think that you start to see some grace and some kindness, and that this is a merciful relationship, not one of domination. And unfortunately, like you pointed out, Mark, feminism in the 21st century is taught domination. And if he's not dominating you, then you need to dominate him, kind of thinking. And that's terrible.
It just backfires.
It's terrible. So, love each other as Christ loves you. There's a tall order, and I don't think anyone's actually going to fulfill that one, but it's our
Which
desire.
is why we finally fall back to grace, which was earned by Christ.
That, as we're heading out of the program here, I love Jim Nestingen is NALC pastor, professor. He used to be with the ELCA. He was one of the last few great theologians in the ELCA. And he talks about how every night as he goes to bed, he and his wife absolve each other of their attitudes toward each other every day. And I always thought that was so sweet and wonderful.
That is great. It is.
Hey, Mark, thanks for doing the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
Till
Good
next
time
time.
as usual.
Yep, we'll see you.
Okay, bye-bye.